At some point in your life, the burden you bear becomes unnameable. It is not the pain of a fresh wound, nor is it regret over a particular loss. Something more intangible, a heaviness that floats through your days like a cloud that never pours, an anguish without a source. You have it when you wake up, keep it with you during chats, and at night lie down next to it. It murmurs, instead of screaming. Additionally, there is a whisper that something is lacking. However, you are unable to specify what. Many people start to experience this unsadness, particularly during the calmer times of midlife. Even if you continue to work, laugh, and be there for other people, there is a silent emptiness inside that nobody can see. Your strength, fortitude, and ability to maintain composure are praised by everyone, but in silence, something is falling apart inside of you. You question why happiness seems so far, why purpose eludes you, and why your soul feels worn out even after you've rested. This spiritual dryness, according to Carl Jung, is an indication that something within of you is ready to come to life and is a symptom of the soul's hunger. Clinical depression is not what this is. It is the sacred and gradual awakening of the self, pleading to be located once more. It is your soul pleading to be heard and felt, reaching out from the shadowy recesses of your inner world. It is the onset of consciousness, not insanity. The purpose of this sadness is to shatter the delusion that you are okay, not to destroy you. It is an indication that you have outgrown the shell you have been living in, not a mistake in your design. You are being called back to yourself. You are not being punished, because sometimes you have to experience the absence of the person you have been acting like before you can become who you really are. Therefore, remember that you are not broken if you feel lost, hollow, or oddly cut off from the life you have created. You stand on the brink of something holy. There is a message in this sadness that will guide you home if you are willing to listen to it. You are the only one who can hear that voice. It stalks you through every discussion, follows you into every room, and speaks accusingly rather than kindly. It conveys the message that you are unworthy, that you ought to have done more, and that you will never experience true love unless you do it flawlessly. You become so accustomed to this voice that you lose sight of its weight. But the thing that hurts you the most is this voice, not the outside world. We are taught to stand strong against the outside world, to erect barriers against suffering, criticism, and betrayal. However, nobody gets us ready for the internal conflict. This inner battleground is characterized by subtly abandoning oneself rather than by swordplay or yelling. It starts when you begin to doubt your value, not because someone else told you to, but because you initially believed it. The inner critic becomes more and more pronounced over time, becoming both a judge and an executioner. You do it to yourself. You no longer need rejection from others to feel inadequate. This inner voice, however, was not maliciously born. Survival had formed it. You discovered somewhere along the line that self-criticism protects you. Perhaps others wouldn't have to suffer if you were able to punish yourself first. You wouldn't experience pain if you were perfect. However, it only ever served to construct a prison out of your own imagination. Your voice is not a sign of weakness. You're a human. You were the only one who knew how to adjust to emotional storms by protecting yourself. The suffering comes from what the voice says as well as from what it prevents you from being. Because you haven't done enough, it prevents you from sleeping. Because you'll look foolish, it prevents you from speaking up. It stifles your impulses, wants, and dreams. It silences your soul in the process. But when you stop taking that voice as fact, healing starts. Whose voice is this really? You ask yourself. When you stop, you'll discover that it frequently sounds more like the echoes of old wounds than who you really are. Living in constant conflict with your own thoughts was never intended for you. You were supposed to be your own haven. Therefore, the question is not whether you will ever be injured by the world. The more profound query is, will you? Because the world is less able to harm you once you stop becoming your own worst enemy. The first step toward healing is making the decision to pay more attention to your soul's whisper for peace and less attention to the voice of fear. Something deeper had already taken hold before you had the vocabulary to describe your suffering. A pattern was engraved into your nervous system long before you sharply assessed yourself in the mirror or questioned your value in front of others, not voluntarily but by absorption. Like invisible fingerprints embedded in your psyche, you inherited your thoughts, fears, and doubts from the people and things around you. You now go through life responding to impulses that were never really yours without even realizing it. This is because the mind learns by repetition, not because you are a bad person. Additionally, your system learned to adjust if you saw or experienced criticism, neglect, pressure, or conditional affection on a regular basis. It discovered that being quiet made you safe, that being smaller made you likable, and that momentary solace came from appeasing other people. The purpose of these patterns was always survival, never truth. It's not your self-defeating thoughts that hurt the most. It's because you secretly think those ideas are true. You mistake your true identity for inherited programming. However, what if your sadness isn't a sign that you're not feeling well? What if it's a sign that you're living a story that doesn't fit anymore? A story that was told to you before you had the ability to make your own decisions. According to Carl Jung, the unconscious mind is a repository of out-of-date instructions, a sort of emotional software that operates in the background in addition to being a location of hidden trauma. It also has bugs. Just like any old code, you continue to select what exhausts you. You continue to work at occupations that undervalue you. You blame everything on fate and keep going through the same emotional cycles. None of it, however, is fate. It's identity wrapped in memory. Something divine occurs the instant you recognize the pattern. The soul that hears the voice and the voice you hear separate. That's where your freedom is. You understand that the voice that tells you that you are unworthy is not you. It's you who's seeing it. And that witness has the ability to modify the present rather than obliterate the past. Blaming the past is not a necessary part of healing. It entails taking back your future. You can start editing the script after you have a clear view of it. You don't have to punish yourself for being a byproduct of a system that you didn't request. You can start living as though you wrote your own truth. Therefore, take a moment. If you feel trapped, shattered, or ashamed, ask what was I taught to believe rather than what's wrong with me, because ultimately unlearning the story that was never yours to bear may be the solution to your pain rather than curing yourself. The familiar aching of suffering has a weird consolation to it, not because it offers happiness but because it brings regularity. Furthermore, even if it hurts, the familiar can feel safer than the unknown when life feels overwhelming or unpredictable. The victim role frequently develops gradually, like an old chair rather than being explicitly chosen. It protects you from the jarring edges of danger, the burden of accountability, and the horrifying scope of possibilities. You continue to experience suffering because it helps you avoid the more profound dread of change, not because you love it. Time is shield yourself from the disappointment of trying again when you tell yourself that nothing ever works out. You protect your heart from the danger of being noticed when you tell yourself that people always depart. This is a survival tactic derived from injuries, not weakness. However, in the long run, what keeps you safe in the short term slowly destroys you. Carl Jung frequently discussed the shadow, the hidden self that harbors both suppressed strength and repressed traumas. The part of you that yearns to ascend is banished when you only identify as the one who has been harmed. Even though you might not be aware of it, your suffering takes on a form of identity. You cling to it out of fear that you wouldn't know who you are without it rather than out of want. The gentle trap so closes, but not with chains, but with tales of I can't, I'm not ready, I always mess it up. This is just how life is. These words become your life's screenplay. They turn into your silent jail filled with excuses to keep you small. However, a part of you suffers deep down, not just from the agony, but also from your inability to live completely beyond it. When you challenge the story, healing starts. When you question yourself, what would it mean to truly live, rather than, how do I survive? This calls for bravery. Not the boisterous sort that charges into combat, but the silent kind that dares to abandon the known and venture into the unknown. It's having the guts to mutter, maybe I am more than my pain. What if I tried again or something similar? Once protecting you, The victim position now prevents you from becoming, you don't have no power. All you are doing is waiting at the doorway, which can only be opened from the inside. To go through it is to run the danger of failure, heartache, and disappointment. But it's also about tasting happiness, closeness, and your true self. It was never intended for your soul to remain concealed beneath the wreckage of your past trauma. It was supposed to rise over them and move freely. And the moment you stop explaining why you can't and begin living the tale of what occurs when you can, that freedom starts. The majority of people think that their circumstances have trapped them. The underlying fact, however, is much more nuanced and eerie. You are not constrained by the world around you. The story that started long ago and that you continue to whisper to yourself in the silent recesses of your mind confines you. The one who tells you that you are insufficient. That indicates that you're too damaged. It implies that mending is for other people, not for you. There is no truth to this story. It is composed of repetition, trauma, cultural norms, or parental ideas that are accepted without your consent, and wounds that are never questioned. When you were too little to understand otherwise, you made the quiet commitment that this is who I am and this is all I'll ever be. Thus, it permeates your decisions, relationships, and even dreams like a song that has been put on repeat. According to Carl Jung, the psyche is flexible rather than fixed. However, pain solidifies into identity if you identify with it for a long enough period of time. You begin to wear grief like a name badge and cease to view it as an emotion. You confuse the harsh voice in your head for your own and cease to challenge it. These tales eventually turn into unseen rules that determine what you are worthy of, how far you will go, and what type of love you will accept. The sad thing is that most folks aren't even aware that it's a story. They believe it to be true. However, your thoughts are the echo of your history, attempting to persuade you that the future must not change. They are not the voice of truth. If you follow the voice that tells you this always happens to me, you're living in response rather than innovation. You ruin fresh starts, reenact old roles, and blame it on fate. When you begin to observe the story instead of following it, healing starts. When you ask questions like, whose voice is this? And why have I trusted it for so long? Instead of what's wrong with me? When you stop reciting lines and start writing new ones. When you understand that the cage, not you, is the subject of the story, and the secret has always been your soul. This has nothing to do with optimistic thinking. Standing in the middle of your inner world and resolving to no longer dwell inside a version of oneself that is molded by guilt, fear, or silence is the key to genuine seeing. It is a holy return, a silent revolt. It starts when you pose the one query that dispels the delusion, what if this story isn't true? Sadness is no longer the adversary in that moment. It turns into the aching, the wake-up call, and the signal that beckons you to return to who you were before the world commanded you to be. The tale is not you. The only person who has ever waited to rewrite it is you.